Hello, friends. Welcome to the Brave Writer Podcast. I'm Melissa Wiley, Julie Bogart's co-host. Today, we're excited to share with you Julie's talk about the importance of play and how play fosters learning. This is a rich and juicy exploration of the critical role of play in your children's education. Julie also digs into what it means to be a lifelong learner and how you are using play right now in your own life to learn, and you may not even realize it. So here's Julie. Enjoy.
Welcome. Tonight we're going to talk about the role of play in education. And I want us to begin first by just noticing the feeling you have around the word play. So if you would in chat, when you hear somebody say, kids should play, or learning can happen through play, pause for a moment, check in with yourself, and give me a true reaction to that phrase. Learning can happen through play. Let me hear what you have to say. How? Great question, Catherine. Kathleen, 100% agrees. So does Stacy. I may not have done much right, but I've done that. Play is how we learn as kids and adults. I need more play in my life. Play is critical. Absolutely. But what about older kids? I agree, but how much? These are wonderful questions. I'll be honest. Play is hard for me to engage in. I will tell you something that happened to me, and make sure you select everyone in the blue bubble so we can all read your amazing comments. Otherwise, it just goes to me and Farzana. One of the things that I remember as a very vivid memory of early childhood with my children, I think I had 3 kids under 5 at that point. And I remember vividly sitting on the floor, playing with the same toys that my children have been playing with, right? Because I had 3 kids. They kept using the same toys. And it was the middle of the afternoon in Southern California in a very small condo. And I remember thinking in my brain, oh my gosh, how can I keep doing this? This is so boring to me. And I was loving my children. Like I was a La Leche League leader. I believed in attachment parenting. I wanted to be with them. I was intending to homeschool them. But there was something about just participating on the floor, doing those toys over and over again, that I thought, oh my gosh, there has to be more to my adult life in this juncture than restacking the rings, then making a block tower and knocking it over, then rolling a ball back and forth. And that's because my mind at that point was very centered on myself. I mean, I loved my kids, but I was not able to appreciate or notice as much as I needed to the power of what that was doing for my kids. I knew it intellectually. I believed it, and I wasn't going to do anything different than play with them. But one of the reasons play can be hard is because once you get to adulthood, you also are on this mission to use your life in this more like grown-up way because you've already done childhood. And so what I find with a lot of parents who've got kids under 5 is they fall in love with the idea of homeschooling and they want to start it with very young kids because now the parent feels like they're doing something purposeful. Like, oh, good. Now I have a schedule. I can read to my children. I can teach them the sounds of the alphabet. I can start counting numbers. We can learn how to do something that will be a part of their lives forever. It won't, quote unquote, just be play. Do any of you have that feeling? Have any of you felt like, I know this is important, but I get bored. And what makes me feel like I'm more enjoying my children is when we're doing things that look a little more productive to me. When I can tell that my gifts are being used, I'm not just supervising baby toys. 100%, you feel guilty about it. Yes, and yes, absolutely. What's play for my kids isn't play for me. Yes, definitely. Now she's 8 and I look back thinking maybe we should have played more. The reason you don't play more is because you already played. Like you've already mastered these toys. It's not fascinating to figure out the Fisher-Price rings and how they stack. You could do it with your eyes closed. For your 3-year-old, that is the height of interesting, right? Like stacking those, getting them in the right order, figuring it out more than once. That's interesting to them. Rolling the car, watching it go over terrain, very interesting to them. Opening and closing the doors on the little cars. I bought my grandchildren when we were in Spain. I just got back from my vacation. We went to Italy and Spain. And while we were there, I was looking for gifts for my grandkids. Well, my grandchildren are obsessed with all public utility vehicles. It's the excavator, the fire truck, the ambulance, the school bus, the police vehicle. And while we were in Spain, we saw these, Guardia Civil, right? They're the police cars that have Spanish writing on them. So that just seemed perfect. And I gave the two that I purchased for my granddaughter Lavender and her brother Asterius today after the zoo. And they immediately get them out of the box and they're opening and closing the doors and flipping them over and rolling them on their arms. Lavender is 4, Asterius is 2. And I thought, yeah, that's what children do. They're investigating how things work. They're noticing things about what they're holding in their hands because it's still fresh. It isn't old hat. It's not something you've already done a million times. So one of the issues about play, and this is why I wanted to start this way, is that it's not that we don't believe it's important for children. It's that, dang it, we feel like we're going to have to be their playmate for all of it. Like, I have to put on dress-up clothes too. I've got to roll the ball back and forth. I've got to stack the rings. I've got to set up the puzzle. I've got to let them have access to art supplies and make a big mess. Is that part of your reluctance around play? How many people are struggling with that aspect of the play conundrum? The feeling that you're essential to it working. Kara says yes, and I appreciate that wholehearted, enthusiastic yes. A lot of my kiddos play 8 and 6 is building, creating new projects. We've set some loving limits to control the house or it's overwhelming. Hard lately to feel able to let go when it's a struggle to keep a sense of calm in the house. My 8-year-old tells me I play wrong and that's hard. Oh my gosh, that is gutting. So here you are investing your time and energy in something as a gift to your child. And then they're like, you're doing it wrong. Awful, awful. Yes. Okay. Somebody just brought up Charlotte Mason's masterly inactivity. Amazingly, we are going to talk about that. Very good. Okay. So here are a few things to know right out of the gate. For your children to play well, it doesn't require an adult. I'm not saying an adult shouldn't be involved. I think you should be involved frequently with a lot of joy. But it doesn't hinge on your involvement in the sense of you're putting on the dress-up clothes or you're also in the Nerf gun war, right? It isn't only contingent on your participation. Play for children is something that they engage in because it's their work. The same way that keeping house feels like it's your work and not theirs to the same degree. You have an innate drive to order your household or to create a place where people can live with sanitary bathrooms and food for meals, right? Like you put things on the wall to make it interesting to look at. That's your work as a young adult between 20 and about 45 or 50. You are sort of taking on those skills of what it means to create a life worth living together as a family. Your kids have a similar drive. They won't always love their play, just like you don't always love cooking, but they, on a consistent basis, will be drawn to toys, fantasy, imagination, because that is the innate work of being a child. One of my friends early on, she was in her 50s and I was in my 30s, and she saw me, she came over to visit, and by then I had 3 or 4 kids, and I kept getting up from our conversation to guide, steer, engage, participate in my children's play. And she was a generation older than me, right? So she's like 20 years older than me. And she said, Julie, something that you might want to learn now is that children can play without you. It is not fully dependent on your participation. You can actually allow them to play with friends, play with siblings, or play on their own. And somebody brought up Charlotte Mason's masterly inactivity, which is so ideal because that's something that I wanted to address tonight. there is this idea that our children should constantly be entertained and that play is entertaining. I want you to think about that for a moment. Do you think of play in the same sentence as entertainment, as something that is fun? Anyone else? Anyone else think that? For me, that's what I thought play was. I thought play was fun. I thought it was entertainment. I almost saw play as a reward for having done the things that you're supposed to do, right? Eat lunch and then you can go play. Not, well, I see you're playing, so you can skip lunch. No, it's more like you need to eat lunch and then you can play, right? Finish your math work, then you can play. How many people treat it sort of as the fun, the entertainment after they've done their other stuff? Okay, I'm just looking at your comments. Don't worry, I'm still here. Some people say, eat lunch so you can play. I do this. Someone else said that they see play as a child's work. Sometimes they want to play alone, but they want to show me what they're playing. That is absolutely true. Kids do want some kind of validation, audience, encouragement, reminder that what they're doing is valuable and worthwhile. So when we're thinking about setting up the conditions for play that is a part of the learning experience, I want you to think about it a little differently than the way the culture always talks about play. Play is sort of a reward after you do what you should. Play is entertainment. Play is fun. What if we reframe it to play is the condition in which a child can learn? Play is the condition in which a child can learn. Peter Gray, who, if you listen to his TED Talk that we link to inside the masterclass, he talks about play as the actual activity of children. It's basically what they are designed to do, and they do it all the time. One of my most favorite memories of my granddaughter was realizing that she made this transition at about, 11, 12 months to imaginary play. And I remember her mother, my daughter-in-law, sending me a text message. Oh my gosh, Lavender used an object today to represent something else. I can't even remember what the object was, but it was like, a car or something, and she treated it like food, right? And May was like mind blown. Like she just went right into play. No one had to teach her. She figured out how to do something that was imagination. Pretend. It like came out of nowhere, and she's still in that stage, right? Everything is a game. Everything is play. Everything is figuring out the world through this immersive, full-bodied intention to understand. So if we think of play as the condition in which a child learns, we can start to think differently about the conditions for learning. Now, if we treat school the way adults treat learning, we'll see it like, I don't know, keeping your budget in an Excel spreadsheet. Like, I've got to get this stack of receipts and enter it in and then do the math and see where we are in our budget. It's this sort of orderly, prescriptive behavior that has regularity and incremental steps of growth. Isn't that what we think of as school for most kids? That's how we look at it. We're like, how can I take this big concept, chunk it into developmental stages, and then make steady progress over time that can be measured? That's what schooling treats learning like. So if you imagine kindergarten or preschool, there's a lot of play. There's a lot of play. You go in, there are games, there are toys, there are stackables, there are countables, there are dress-up clothes, there are paints, there are, crayons. And as the child gets older, those tools drop away. Pretty soon, you just have, a pencil and white lined paper. Pretty soon, you're sitting at a desk, not on cute, cozy pillows at a low table. Pretty soon, the art supplies are in the elective you take when you're in high school. They're not in the 6th grade classroom anymore. Pretty soon, play becomes what? Fun and entertainment after the work is done. But what if you saw it differently? What if The magic markers don't disappear when a child turns 8 or 10 or 12. What if the conditions that you have set up in your homeschool accommodate the various methods of play that become apparent over a child's lifetime? So if we look at kids under age 8, one of the things we see them doing is acting out regular behaviors. They get a shopping cart and they suddenly go shopping in their own playroom with fake, vegetables and fruits. And then they unload those inside of a refrigerator and a cupboard. I mean, isn't that ironic? Like, those things actually exist in the real world, but our kids enjoy doing the play version. They try on dress-up clothes in order to pretend to be somebody else. What are they learning when they do that? They're learning how to inhabit a different personality, different viewpoint, a different way of being in the world, right? They're imagining being Robin Hood, or they're imagining being the Little Mermaid who can't walk and has fins. They're imagining being a princess, or they're imagining being a school teacher. These, when we start to actually deconstruct what the play is doing, children are using their bodies and their imaginations to figure out how to belong in the world. I'll say that again. Children are using their bodies and imaginations to figure out how to belong in the world. And they're self-teaching. They are creating the conditions that help them remember and learn what they need to know or what they want to know. So if we are going to bring this spirit of play through the years, between the ages of 8 and 12, your kids will be learning the tools they need for the rest of their lives to learn anything. And that is mathematics, reading, and writing, the 3 R's. And those are best delivered through what we love to fondly call in Brave Writer, the 4th R, relationship. Relationship. When I talk about relationship, I'm talking not only about your cozy relationship with your children, I'm also talking about their relationship to the subject matter. And here's what's incredible. They form the deepest bond and the deepest connection to subjects that feel playful. Oh, Julie, really? Yes, it's true. This is why games are so powerful with kids, because they're actually using the skills that you're teaching them to enjoy a goal, an approximation of behaviors they're going to use the rest of their lives. Monopoly, Settlers of Catan, resource management, rolling the dice, doing those calculations, all of that stuff is delivered to them through a game, through a playful experience. When you teach your kids to read, the experience of learning phonics is not the same as being a person who's lost in a chapter book and loving the pleasure of a book. Reading is playful phonics. That's what it is. It's putting phonics into a playful context. Reading for the sake of pleasure, of learning, of knowing more. I don't know if you've ever thought about reading as play, but it is. It's a kind of play. It's playing with this very scientific system of sounds and symbols that we have erected so that people could transmit their imaginations to the page so that I could enter their world and inhabit it with them, share it with them. So when we're working on things like phonics and math, I want you to consider, how do these help my child lead a playful life? I want to give you a comparison just to help you think a little bit more deeply about this. Imagine, for instance, that your child was going to learn how to ski. If your goal was just to teach your child the skills of skiing, you might show them how to buckle on the skis. You might show them what it looks like to ski. You might talk about, getting your balance with your skis. But if they never get to go on a chairlift and come down a hill, then all that hard work feels really pointless. But it is hard to learn to ski. I don't know if you've ever tried it, but if you don't have good balance, if you aren't used to using your legs in those ways, you're going to fall over a few times. There's a knack to it, a trick to it. It's why people take skiing lessons. So when we're talking about the skill building, if your child doesn't have a vision of how that skill building is going to deliver play in their life, they're not going to want to learn it. Let me let that sink in for a minute. We are so duty bound. We're like, you have to learn grammar. Why? What's the point of knowing grammar? What good is it for anyone? Do you know who loves grammar the most? People who play with grammar, who play with puns, who are comedians and write stand-up, people who write books, people who construct languages, people who play Wordle and connections every day. If you don't have a play objective, a joy and entertainment, a fun outcome for the thing your child is trying to learn, why would they bother? You know, if I think about learning to cook, I remember when I got married, I was 22 years old. And I'd been living in college in an apartment with my famous baked potato and baked chicken breast for 4 years, right? Like I was not a cook. I joke that when I got married, I knew how to make 2 meals, salad and stir fry. And then I was out of ideas. I didn't know anything else. This was, the early 1980s, and I was living in California. And my mom had been a health nut. There wasn't a single cookbook in my house, not one. I never followed a recipe in my life. And so I remember a friend of mine gave me a cookbook, and it was called the More with Less Cookbook. Have any of you seen it? I still have mine. It is literally in tatters. It has no covers. There are pages that have fallen out. But here's what was incredible about that cookbook. It was very step-by-step. But I felt like I was entering a world of play because everything was from scratch. And they were very step-by-step about it. And they even gave you like a little bit of a story of its health benefits or its impact on the agricultural environment of the world, because the More with Less cookbook was created by Mennonites, and they actually care about the impact of farming on land. So this is an incredible cookbook. But the reason I wanted to learn to cook was because I stumbled on this incredible cookbook that made it look like an adventure. When I was in college, I didn't have any of that input. So cooking to me just looked like hard work and boring. And I knew how to use a toaster oven. This is all before microwaves. That's how old I am. Do you hear where I'm going with this? There is a willingness on the part of every child to learn skills. I've never met a kid who doesn't want to work on skills. But if they can't see how those skills lead to play, they don't want to do them. And so then what do? We punish them and we say words like this. Well, when you get your spelling homework done, then you can play. And we treat it like schoolwork will never lead to joy. It'll never lead to increased pleasure. It's not about play. Play is the reward for doing all this stuff that feels irrelevant and doesn't take you anywhere beneficial. But if you're reading aloud to your kids and you're reading picture books and you're jotting down their words so that they can hear them read back later and they experience themselves as a writer, when you start teaching phonics, you can actually let them know, we're giving you the tools to play the game of writing. We're giving you the tools to play the game of reading. I'm giving you these math tools so you'll be great at role-playing games using these, 12-faced dice. We're working on this so you can play this. If all you ever did was teach your kids scales and they didn't see a vision of playing piano pieces they love, why would they do it? There is in all of us a desire to play. And one of the reasons I think that when people get married or live together and they move into a house together as young adults, that for the first time, some of those people are suddenly interested in things they didn't care about at all in high school, which is like, what kind of sheets with what kind of thread count? You know what I'm saying? That kicks in because now you get to really play house. This is my space. I own it. I'm going to play in this space. I'm going to make this space what I want it to be. And so now I'm suddenly curious about Benjamin Moore versus Sherwin-Williams paints. I'm going to nerd out over which kind of furnishings I'm going to put in this house. Play is the innate drive of being human. We don't really outgrow it. It's just we outgrow the toys. The toys change, the things that become meaningful to us. We have a big joke in my family. My ex-husband is in an absolute love affair with coffee makers. He always has 3 or 4 barista machines because he loves them. He's always looking for the perfect one so he can make those really fancy cappuccinos with the interesting, decorative tops. I mean, it's hilarious. Those are his toys. We do not outgrow the need to play. But what happens is, even the things that are kind of like our responsibilities, they become for us our grown-up play. We find ways to make them playful and meaningful to us. And let me just tell you something. Adults who haven't caught on to making their lives meaningful and playful often suffer from various levels of depression. Now, I'm not speaking like a researcher or a clinician, but I did do a little bit of research in preparation for this talk. And one of the things that I saw that exists for children, but has been tested some with adults, is play therapy. It's actually using the properties of play to process painful, difficult emotions, trauma, and stuff that's caused us harm. Play can do it all if we will let it. But we have this funny warped idea that play is something we use once in a while to sort of get our kids interested again until we go back to doing the hard work. So what are some of these playful ways that you can help your kids get the skills they need to have meaningful lives later? Well, think about all the things they love. So if dress-up clothes are meaningful to your kids, they could certainly wear dress-up clothes every day of the year, whenever they want. So you might say, surprise me tomorrow when you come down to do your spelling work. I want to see who you're going to be today. What do you want to dress up in? Maybe every time you do copy work or you do dictation or you use their handwriting book or whatever thing they don't love, maybe you say, whenever you're going to do this book, I want you to be one of your favorite Disney characters and surprise me. And you can either dress up or act it out, or we'll put on face paints, whatever you want. And we'll do that every day that you work on copy work. Why would we do this? That almost sounds manipulative, but it's not. Because if I'm Ariel, my copy work is going to have a different personality than if I am Bam Bam from the Flintstones. Is that just dating me like crazy? If I'm Bluey, if I'm Bingo, these are going to have different relationships, right? You could ask your child to narrate a story as though they were Bluey. How would Bluey say it? With what accent? Not for you who live in Australia, same accent. But for Americans, hilarious. Catherine has puppets for everything. Exactly. Oh my goodness. Your puppets could narrate. You could do the times tables with puppets. Couldn't you? Couldn't you? One of the things that I used to do with times tables is we use things like my seashell collection, buttons, M&Ms on those days when I felt especially willing, because these make the learning tactile, more meaningful. They engage the visual, which kids love. By the way, so do I. One year I was making these pillows as a solstice gift. Our family has a particular way that we celebrate solstice in the winter every year. And I was making these pillows and I would cut out this shape of a tree. And then I would use the buttons to put the leaves all over it. I cannot tell you how into this silly project I was. Why? Because it was so much fun to put my hand in a dish of buttons over and over and over. Different colors, different sizes, different shapes. Kids are not different. Could they, if they're doing, you've got an 8-year-old, she's doing addition, single digit addition. Can she do something with buttons to help visualize it, make it tactile? We overvalue pencil and paper. But let me tell you this. Pencil and paper can be fun also. Here's how. get a wide array of pencil implements. We have a whole bunch of them right now inside. I'm going to get a link, or maybe Farzana, you can do it. Inside our bookshop on the Brave Writer website, we have a collection that we've curated from Amazon that's called Tools for the Art of Writing. You want to put some play and zip into your writing life? Go get the alphabet stickers and let your child write a whole sentence with stickers. Go get a variety of gel pens and have your child do their copy work on black paper. Give your kids playful tools. Think about all of you who are saving up money to buy Le Creuset, cookware, or the barista that my ex is, right? With all of his coffee makers. Coffee is just coffee. You don't need 4 coffee makers. What are they called? Espresso machines? I can't even, what is that even called? I can't even remember. I drink tea. So that is not the reason we got divorced, but he's coffee, I'm tea. But what I'm saying is we love a variety of tools, and we're constantly in search for the tool that makes us enjoy the task. I have to shovel snow every year. Do you know what I'm always looking for? A better shovel. And it's really funny when I find a better one, the first thing I hope is that it will snow so I can test it out. Does this not happen to you? Am I a weirdo? Is this not something you relate to? Tell me what you think. Oh, you love your gel pens, math fidget spinners, Bam Bam and Pebbles. I love that. Yay, Carmen. Yes, you feel the same about shovels or rakes. Don't you hate it when you have a bad rake? I mean, come on. If we are going to treat our children at the same level that we treat ourselves, start imagining the world through the tools and play practices that you could incorporate. One of the most overlooked play ways of teaching your kids is through acting. Yes, acting. That's where this face paint, dress up clothes thing helps. For instance, a lot of you will say, I get emails all the time or direct messages in Instagram that say things like, my child's terrible at narrating. They never tell me a good summary. Well, first of all, children don't give summaries. They hone in on one detail that was meaningful, and then they tell you way too much detail about that one thing. Thank God, because that skill goes away when you're my age. So be really interested in the detail that fascinated them, because that's what's teaching them about it. But if you want something more comprehensive, ask them to get a sibling or two together or a couple of friends. Give them the dress-up clothes box and tell them to act out the picture book or act out a version of the chapter. Now they're going to give you a more comprehensive narration. Why? Because they understand beginning, middle, and end when they're acting in a way that they don't when they're narrating. And the reason for that is, first of all, they've heard stories, they've watched movies, they understand beginning, middle, and end. But also it makes them actually conceptualize more of the story. Now, they may not do a great job. I'm not saying they'll get all the details or have a perfect summary. But if you ask them to go ahead and act it out, you're going to get more from them, because why? They have to prepare. They have to think about it. They have to decide who's going to do what. I shared about this in The Brave Learner. I remember being at Dottie's house, my enchanted education friend, and we had just read the book Caps for Sale with all the kids. Some of us were sitting at a kitchen table and we were making fairy houses out of twigs with a glue gun. But there was a little cobble of kids, because between us we had 8, that went into the other room and decided to reenact Caps for Sale. And so they asked for like a hat stand, which weirdly, we happened to have like a coat rack or something. So we brought that out. And in the dress-up clothes were all kinds of hats and clothing. And they acted the entire book out. And they used the book as a reference. That's narration. That's play. That is learning the art of paying attention. That is craft. That's even writing, because they're in their minds actually writing a script. So when we're talking about helping our kids achieve our goals, please ask yourself, how does this look like play? How do I capitalize on tools, on clothing, on kinesthetic energy, on feeling excited to engage? And how does this skill lead to something they actually want to do? Just saying, well, you need this skill because you're going to college in 10 years. Not motivating at all. How many of you during the pandemic, during the lockdown, when you first heard about it, you thought, okay, well, now that everything in my life is canceled and I can't go anywhere, I'm finally going to tackle those photo albums, or I'm finally going to tackle cleaning my basement. And then how many of you didn't? Well, partly we were scared we were all going to die. So I know that was a factor. But the other factor is that when you're not motivated, it doesn't matter how much time you're given to do the thing. You're going to find a way not to do it because you're not motivated, right? So when you have kids who are not motivated to learn their phonics, it's because they have not caught a vision for how this skill will lead them to play, to the thing that is fun and entertaining and meaningful. And play is how we all lead our lives. How many of you have Apple Watches or something similar, and you wear them and they count your steps? Please let me know if you are now a step counter because of your watch or your phone. Yeah. Did you ever care about counting your steps before you had a phone telling you how many steps you were taking? I never cared. In fact, I've never thought about step count in my life until Apple came along and said, I should care about my step count. In fact, back in high school, when I used to run, this is before Walkman, right? So we didn't have anything to listen to. I mean, I had no way to know how far I was going. I would have to get in my car, drive my route for an approximate distance so I would know kind of how far I was going. But I had no music or anything. And here's what I used to do when I went running. My clock radio would come on, and I would try to find a song on the radio that I could get stuck in my head so I could sing it to myself the whole time I was running. This is how boring running was. Needless to say, I did not run 10, 12, 13, 26 miles back then. I ran 3 to 6 miles consistently, and it was a slog. I did it because I was a girl in California who believed that you had to run to be healthy and thin. That's the 1970s and 80s for you, right? When I became a much more grown up, and I'm living in Ohio, and now my kids are mostly raised, I ran into a person that I met for the first time, and she told me she was a runner, and she asked me if I had ever run a marathon, and I said, no. She said, how far do you run? I said, I run on a treadmill now, 3 to 6 miles. And she said, well, would you like to run a half? And I said, how far is that? And she said, 13.1 miles. And I said, yes. Why? Because suddenly someone gave me a goal and they gave me a friendship at the same time. And those two together, irresistible. I put myself through more painful runs simply because I could count the miles on my phone, and I was with a friend, and I was going to get a medal after I ran in a race. What? Does that even make sense? If someone had just told me, which they did many times, run because it makes you healthy, I was like, okay, I can do that for 3 miles. But if someone had just told me you should run a lot more because it's healthy and someday you'll be glad, I would never have run a marathon. Are you starting to hear what I'm saying here? We got to gamify some of this stuff. And part of the problem we have is we have this puritanical culture. I heard someone say on a podcast the other day that the way a puritanical mindset is the second you see anyone having fun, you're suspicious. The second someone's having fun, we have to be suspicious. And that's a little bit how we've all been trained. But what if we flip it over and we're like, oh, thank goodness they're having fun. Oh, thank goodness the motivation is kicking in. Oh, thank goodness baking brownies and having brownies to discuss the teenage books that we're reading was all it took, right? That's the way to think about this. You're not cheating. You're not taking a shortcut. You are literally giving your kids the motivation to master things that will matter for their lives. Suspicion over fun in the office workplace was real. Oh my gosh. I love that Megan said she walks around late at night to reach her step goal. Oh my gosh, who doesn't do that? I do it on the phone. I'm like having a phone call and I'm just circling at my downstairs has a circle where you can make a circle. I just walk in a circle to get those extra several hundred, 1,000 steps in, right? We all do it. But why? Because I don't know, there's something about seeing the step count that feels rewarding. Can we borrow that into our kids' schoolwork? Can they get some kind of a counter that they're counting every time they do a math problem? And when they hit 100 problems, they get some kind of celebration. They get to pop one of those little New Year's champagne poppers, right? It doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be candy, but just something that signals to them that they hit a milestone. Lainey is walking while she watches this. Exactly. Yes. So as your kids get older, the only thing that changes is that they play more like you. Think about it that way. So if you are not motivated to write, but fountain pens make you motivated to keep a journal, why wouldn't you offer a fountain pen to your teenager? If having better tools to do the things you love are important to you, get better tools for your kids. I remember when two of my sons came to me and they're like, Mom, the mainframe computer sucks for gaming. And I was like, oh, I see. Gaming computers matter. That video card matters. And two of my boys built their own computers. We let them get the tools they needed to create the kind of computer they needed to play games. Those two boys, their careers are in computers today. One is an IT specialist. The other is a programmer. Like, they turned their love of computers into careers. Do you see how this works? Have you ever heard the expression, cells that fire together, wire together? This is a neurologist's description of what happens when your kids engage in purposeful practice. To that end, Brave Writer has a brand new product called Practice Pages. You know how sometimes you just want to target one sticky, tricky issue? Maybe your kids mix up common and proper nouns, or maybe they have a hard time differentiating between the three uses of there, and there. Now we've got these short lessons that make use of French-style dictation and reverse dictation tactics to narrow the focus to those specific tricky issues and help your child expand their practice so that those cells can fire and wire together. If you'd like to learn more, go to bravewriter.com/pages or check our show notes. So if someone took away all the fun in my childhood, it explains why everything is so hard, mind-blowing. Why would I do that to my children? Wow. What an honest reflection. Okay, so I'm going to share something really powerful with you, and I think this will help. I got a beautiful message several weeks ago from a mom, and it was on Instagram. It was a story, and she tagged me in it. And then she wrote me a personal note. And in the picture, it was her journal, a whole bunch of colorful pens, a tea light, a cup of tea, and a view out the window to a beautiful scene. And she wrote me a note and she said, "You taught me how to create a beautiful space for my children to learn. And I realized I could also do that for myself." Oh, that is my joy. Let me just tell you that right now. That is the care we can take into adulthood, to know that we deserve to create a beautiful space to do the work of being human. When I was in college, I spent a year abroad in France, and there was this one week where I went to this mountain town called Waymo in Switzerland, a little place called L'Abri. I'm telling you the name because some of you will know what that is. Those of you who know For the Children's Sake, that book, Susan Schaefer Macaulay, her parents had this place called L'Abri, which means the shelter. And it was in the mountains of Switzerland. And the way that it was organized is in the morning, you could just stay there in these gorgeous chalets in the Alps. In the morning, you would do work. We did all of our meals in community. And then in the afternoon, you were free to study. And this was a place where people studied Christian theology. there was this gorgeous library of cassette tapes that you could just put headphones on and listen and look out the window at the freaking Alps. Goats and sheep walking by, the sun going up and down. I mean, the setting was incredible. It was just incredible. And then we would have meals and discuss all the things we were learning. And then in the evening, there would be some kind of a lecture. Now, here's what's interesting. All of that was fascinating. I learned so much. I enjoyed it a whole lot. But the piece that stayed with me the most and the longest was the care they took to make each meal beautiful. There were placemats. There were flower arrangements. All of the bread was perfectly cut in these beautiful like chunks, and it was homemade by the people who lived and worked there, meaning people like me. And then it was put in a basket with a gorgeous, like napkin underneath it. And then each plate was beautiful, and the presentation of the food was beautiful. And I remember hearing them talk about how if you don't value your own life enough to make it beautiful, you become a cog in a machine and you lose your connection to your humanity. What? Do you want to know what I did when I got back to UCLA for my senior year? The first thing I did was buy a cloth napkin, a placemat, a candle, and a vase. And I ate my meals that way as a senior in college. I got the message. And I think it's why I am such an obsessive about tea light candles and poetry tea time. I mean, it really isn't a long step from that to poetry tea time, is it? It is not. Having a beautiful teapot. And why? Why is it when we see those things, when we see the barista make us a beautiful cappuccino with that design, why do we just suddenly feel better about ourselves? We're like, oh, today is actually a good day because I got a design on my coffee. That is play. That is play. Play is not just video gaming. That's a kind of play. It's not a wrong kind of play. It's just one of many. When I have grandchildren over, you know what I keep in my cupboard at all times? Bubbles. Because there is never not a moment when bubbles don't save the day for small children. If the day is going wrong, start blowing bubbles. I learned that with 5 kids. Keep that kind of mindset. How can I be reminded that my humanity deserves the nourishment of things that bring me pleasure? That's all play is. And for small children, all you need to do is let them play. When I get these emails from moms who have 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds, and they're just ready to start playing school, because that's all that's happening. They're like, I want to start homeschooling. I'm like, oh, you want to play school? That's the play you want to do. You played house. You got your house set up. Then you played becoming a mother. Now you want to play school. I get it. But your kids are too young. They're too young. Oh my gosh. Farzana. I have Joyful. That's going to be my recommendation at the end. Okay. We'll talk about that in a minute. But what I was going to say is this. What was I going to say? Where was I? Somebody. I got distracted by my own chat. Help me. Help me remember where I was. That was silly. I wish I could rewind. Boo-hoo. Oh, playing school. Playing school. Thank you. You guys are awesome. Playing school. Okay, so here's what it is. When you have the craving to start homeschooling before your kids are old enough, it's because your mind suddenly is craving a project so you can play. And so what I love to tell parents is, if you need structure and learning and all that stuff because you have this fond memory of learning and playing school, do it for you. Learn something. Go ahead, set up your schedule. You're going to learn how to draw. In fact, where is that book? I just saw it. Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain. That's my absolute favorite drawing book of all time. Where is that? That's so weird. It was just sitting here on my desk so I could show it to you, and now I can't find it. Oh, there it is. Oh, yeah, here it is. Actually, this is Drawing on the Artist. Oh, there it is. Okay. Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain. This is a basic text that will teach you how to draw representationally. Don't make your kids learn phonics at 4. Teach yourself how to draw. That is my recommendation. That should be a reel. I might do that tomorrow. Honestly, if you have a craving to set up school and your kids are not ready for that, or maybe they're even old enough for that, but they're not enjoying it, can you please set up school for yourself? Go ahead and make a little lesson plan. Go through and set up how much you'll do each day. Buy all the materials so that you'll love it. One year when I was really active on Periscope, I decided to show everyone what I meant by teaching yourself something and playing. And so what I did is I taught myself a variety of letterings, like how to do letterings that look different, like bubble letters and artistic letters that have little flowers on them, etc. And I did a different Brave Writer lifestyle principle each month and drew it and then sent them out as a freebie to anyone who wanted them. It was pretty silly. Go ahead, create for yourself a lesson plan, something to learn, and have the discipline to carry it out. Do you know how much that will teach your kids? Do you know how much, if they see you taking pleasure in following your own lesson plan, some of them are going to be like, I want a lesson plan. When I was learning New Testament Greek, my daughter Katrin suddenly wanted to learn Greek. She saw me doing my copy work every day. They were writing in English. I was doing mine in Greek. So she started. I got her own Greek course, and we sat there together working on Greek. For Thanksgiving that year, everybody's name place card was with the Greek alphabet. If you lead from the idea of your own curiosity, play, using this momentum to learn and grow, your entire family will be infected with that experience. And so how do you do this for older kids? You tap in the same way. You say things like, it's high school. It would be great if we could discuss these books you're reading. What would be the most entertaining way to do that? Should we always meet at Barnes & Noble and get a coffee and just sit in the cozy chairs and do that once a week? Would it be helpful if you invited over all your friends? I was sharing the other day on a podcast that my daughter, Johanna, decided she wanted to discuss literature with her dad, not me, because he was a lit professor. And, she'd had a lot of me over the years. And she invited 5 boys. No girls. It was just her and 5 teenage boys and her dad discussing literature. You think that doesn't sound fun to a 15-year-old girl? It did. And they had a great time. And guess what night of the week they met? Friday night. Because then it felt exciting, like it was an outing. That's play. That's play. So what we're trying to think about is, how do we create the conditions that make this thing that our child needs to learn not only interesting, but sustainable? And how does it tie to a vision of what good things it offers us down the road? If there's no vision attached to why they have to work on algebra, for some kids, that's going to feel really painful, like a punishment. And to just keep heaping on the shame and the blame and the control doesn't necessarily fix it. Okay, we have about 10, 15 minutes left. If you have questions about this topic, put them in the Q&A folder. I would love to troubleshoot. While you're thinking of your questions, let me go over a couple of books. This book, Joyful, was recommended to us by one of our amazing staff members on Brave Writer. In fact, a relative of Farzana's. She's no longer working with us. It's called Joyful: The Surprising Power of Ordinary Things to Create Extraordinary Happiness by Ingrid Fettel Lee. If you are one of those people who hears all this and then you're like, but I don't have a creative bone in my body, here you go. A whole book with confetti, very on theme for Brave Writer. She is giving you a link so that you can go see Ingrid's website and discover this amazing book. We read it as a Brave Writer team. And I'm just going to read you a couple of the chapter headings. Listen to this: energy, abundance, freedom, harmony, play, surprise, transcendence, magic, celebration, and renewal. And then the final part is a joyful toolkit. Okay? So if you need a tutorial, how about you play school, set up a lesson plan, figure out what pace you're going to read each chapter, find one passage in each chapter for your copy work to put in your scatter book, and then assign yourself to implement one idea per chapter. Take 10 weeks to do it, or 10 months. You could do one chapter a month if you need to go slower. What do you think? Is that a good idea? All right. For those of you who don't know how to draw and you want to feel what it feels like to be a child learning how to read, do drawing on the right side of the brain. Experience the befuddling power of why your hand won't do what your brain is telling it to do. Start to develop an appreciation for the challenge of learning a skill from scratch. By the way, you will learn the skill and you will be so impressed with yourself by the end, you will think you're an artist. It is the most powerful, transformational experience I've ever had in learning, is learning to draw. Blew my mind. Really a precursor to raising critical thinkers, because Betty has this book, Drawing on the Artist Within. And this is about using art to critically think. It's such a good book. In fact, some of the classes in Brave Writer's online program come directly from me having done this book. I used that book to help me think innovatively about how to teach writing. And Betty Edwards' insights and the processes I adopted literally helped me craft the pedagogy that guides Brave Writer. I'm not kidding you. This woman's incredible. And then here is a great book to read by John Holt, How Children Learn, that really underscores it's. I hate the print version of it. It's really ugly printing because it's so old and they didn't update it. But the content is so beautiful. And I think it will, it's written in a narrative style, but I think it will inspire you to really be committed to this play idea. And then I don't have his book because when I read it, it was in the library, but Free to Learn by Peter Gray is also just phenomenal for all of this. Oh, good. Ingrid Fettel-Lee has a TED Talk. Farzana, hang on to that and let's add it to the masterclass and a link to the book. And we'll add these to our Brave Learner Home book resources that are inside the Brave Writer bookshop so that you have that too. We can do that by Monday. Okay, sometimes my kids are suspicious of things I try to make fun and it's so deflating. Oh yeah, no, you can't try to make them fun. No, they have to make their own fun. Here is a way for you to approach it. And here's what I want you to understand. When we try to, quote, make something fun, it's like we're baptizing the bad thing in fun and our kids see it as a manipulation. So that's why they resist. But if instead we don't announce, we don't try, but we create opportunities for fun to be had, now your kids may engage. So this is why I really love the unschooling concept called strewing. And my version of it is what I call clear the coffee table. So occasionally your house becomes wallpaper. Your kids have already seen all the toys. They've seen all the writing implements. They've seen all the books. So when you say, go find something fun to do, they can't see it anymore. It's invisible to them. What you need to do is clear the coffee table and leave something intriguing on it without announcing it, and allow them to discover it without you explaining how to use it. So maybe it's a birding book and binoculars, maybe it's jacks, maybe it's a video, maybe it is a board game, maybe it's a deck of cards. Whatever you leave there, let your kids discover it and explore it. And if they come to you and say, hey, what are these pens for? Am I allowed to color with them? You know, you put out black paper and white gel pens. You might say, I guess so. I don't know why else it would be there, right? Like a little less eagerness, a little less enthusiasm. Sometimes our kids are like, she's going to trick me into learning math. I can't cooperate with this. And you can also ask their opinion. Like you're working on math facts and you could say something like, today we're going to work on math facts. I have buttons, seashells, and M&Ms. Which ones do you want to use? And see what they say, as opposed to, I know. Let's learn our math facts by using something fun. I'm not saying that's what you said, but I know that we can over-explain and over-announce. I met one mom one time who had basically turned her house into just this spectacular, like, I don't even know, like a Hallmark store. There were all kinds of things on the walls and hanging and all kinds of tools. It was just too much. She was having a really wonderful time, but her kids didn't have any of the participation in creating it. So for them, it was just more stuff to look at. And she was so crestfallen that didn't make her kids want to do whatever the thing was that was associated. So I said back to her, I said, take it all down, put all of it in bins, and then say to your kids, hey, I'm going to go make lunch. Could you make this room look cool? Here's a whole bunch of stuff. I'm bored. I need somebody to surprise me with a cool looking room. Could you hang some stuff up and rearrange the furniture and just make it interesting? Oh, they'll do that, especially if you're not in the room. That's the pivot that you might want to make. I love all this, but the novel ideas, ways to spice it up, get exhausting for me to try to always come up with. Yeah, you don't have to. That's the thing. If you simply have, for instance, placemats, once you have them, right? What we need is more strewing of available materials. And we can also put some of this on our kids. So when we're thinking about math, for instance, and your kids are having a hard time with it, you could say this, you know what? I notice we're all having a hard time with math and we all know it has to be done. And I know it helps us with board games. So let's figure out what board game we want to play today. And then I want us to each take a week. Here's some ideas I have. Can we put them on the whiteboard? Like, would it help if we let you have a day off every week? Would it help if we every other day change the number of problems that you're working on? Would it help if you worked in teams? Would it help if you did it in the afternoon? Like, create with your kids some of the solutions. It isn't your job to go off stage and guess what will make them happy or make it feel worth doing. It's your job to collaborate with them. And of course, my book, The Brave Learner, is stock full of things to try that you don't even have to think of. And then the last thing I'll say is you can't make everything fun every day. So maybe aim for making something interesting once a week, and then maybe the momentum will pick up. Maybe you just start by buying a whole bunch of cool writing implements and different papers. And every time you sit down to do anything with paper, you're like, here's the collection of papers. Here's the collection of pens. Yep, you can use them for math too. That's fine with me. Like that. And just see where it goes. Don't try to tap dance your way into happiness. That will exhaust you and your kids. Okay, I would love ideas for play for tween 11-year-old girls for social time, like a play date for older kids that is not at my house, not pricey or free. Trying to get my daughter connections with friends. We have food allergies, so restaurants are out. I feel lost on tween girls. Okay, I don't know what your library system is like, but our library system had some pretty interesting teen activities. They had at one point a monthly poetry slam just for teens. And so they would come and they would write poems, and they set up the room like a whole bunch of tables, like with red tablecloths, low lighting. And then they would take turns at the mic. And this inspired my kids to write more poetry than any poetry tea time. But they were primed for it because of poetry tea time, right? So libraries might be a good place to look. Art museums, anything in the arts. We had a Cincinnati Shakespeare company that had a high school company, and my kids joined that. I think what you're looking for, if you have kids who love card games, like, I don't know, those ones that the card shops do, that's a fun place. I don't know what your girls are like. Things like fencing, archery, those can be places where they make friends. Indoor rock climbing. So I would look into some of those. When you're talking about not pricey, I don't know the scale of prices of these things, but I do know that when you give your kids the opportunity to be in those kinds of settings, they can also raise funds to help defray the cost. That's part of the motivation piece. In regards to learning alongside of our children, do you have any recommendations for myopic minds? I tend to focus on things in a down the rabbit hole sort of way and I am disoriented when I am interrupted. I cannot conceive of how you learned Greek alongside of your children. How did you do that? Well, I did my copy work with them, but when I had to study it and do the exercises, I had to do those alone. And when I was writing papers, I had to leave the house. Now I can write a book. I wrote countless thousands and thousands of pages of articles while my kids were watching TV. I do have an ADD brain that can tune things out and focus. But when I need to do critical thinking, I have to have dead quiet. So while my kids were still growing up, I'd have to leave the house to do that. So, and guess what? What a great model. Hey guys, I'm going to the library. I've got to write a paper. Hey guys, I'm studying Greek. I'm going to the library for quiet. I mean, that's kind of amazing. Do you know the first place I went when I got my driver's license when I turned 16, the day I turned 16, was the library so I could study. So this is a very old habit for me. And honestly, it's because my mother was that person. She took us to the library every week. She was a huge library enthusiast. That's kind of how it works. And also, you do so many things when your kids are around you that you're learning, right? You do. You take care of plants, you make food, you read recipes, you repair drywall holes that your, kid punched. Like, you learn all that stuff with your kids around. So there are levels of what you're applying yourself to. One of the favorite things that all my kids did is we let them decide what color to paint or decorate their bedrooms when they were in their teen years. So they went through these periods where they were listening to like musicals or audiobooks while they're scraping wallpaper. And then we go shopping for the paint, then we'd test it, then they'd paint with their siblings. They had the ugliest color bedrooms, bright orange, bright red. One room was lavender and yellow. Like, what? Turquoise blue. Okay. Right? Like, they can be listening to an audiobook while they're painting their room, like a hard one. I think that's when my kids all fell in love with musical theater and they started listening to all these musicals while they were painting their bedrooms. Do you see what I'm talking about? Give them something commensurate with their skill set. Play doesn't just have to mean toys. It means that meaningful, pleasurable engagement with an activity that is going to produce something wonderful for you. That's why we do things. Okay, let's see. One more. But Julie, were there days, phases that you didn't want to go to the library as a kid? I mean, I'm old, so I can't remember not wanting to go, right? I can't remember that. And is it possible that there are kids who don't want to go? Yeah. And maybe they don't have to go once they're 15 or 16 because they've outgrown it and they're more interested in going to Kings Island, the theme park. That's also natural. When my kids were, I had 5 kids still living at home. I always took us on these nature walks and these nature hikes. And I remember my daughter, Johanna, being like, I hate nature. I don't want to go. She had done all these nature journals. I still have them. And she hit the teen years and suddenly nature was just boring. She wanted to go to the mall with her friends. She wasn't. Okay, well, guess what we're doing for her 35th birthday this year? She's making us all go camping. I don't want to camp. She's doing that 1,000 hours outdoors with her kid. She is so dedicated to the outdoors. And I said to her at one point, it cracks me up that you love the outdoors so much because when you were 15, you hated it. She goes, Mom, I was 15. Like, how can you think that was a definition of the things I'd value in my life? Hilarious. So keep that in mind. Don't be overly attached to a child who's going through a phase of disliking the family culture. I mean, that's just normal. Yeah. Okay, I think we got through all of the questions. This was fun. I love talking about play, and I hope that you will check out some of these books and that you will have a delightful month. Get outside, play games, streamers, confetti always helps, candles, brownies. This book, Joyful, is about to make all of you so happy. I'm so excited. All right, everybody. Take care. You've been listening to the Brave Writer Podcast. I'm Julie Bogart, and Melissa Wiley is my co-host. This podcast is produced by Nova Media with support from team member Jeanette Hall. Thank you for listening, and for leaving either a starred or written review on the podcast app of your choice. Anytime you do that, you bring a lot of joy to the team and you support our work. So thanks in advance.